The galaxy had lived in the shadow of fear for centuries, whispers of a creature whose existence seemed like a myth, a nightmare born from the darkest corners of the universe. Its name alone struck terror into the hearts of entire species, the beast. It wasn't just a predator. It was a force of nature, an unstoppable, godlike being capable of erasing entire civilizations with a single swipe of its claw. No planet was safe, no star system immune. Every attempt to track or study the beast had ended in destruction, with survivors few and far between, if any at all. Stories of the beast's rampages were scattered across the cosmos. Entire planets had vanished in its wake. No one could confirm its origin or even its true form. Some said it was an ancient weapon, a biological horror created by a long-lost race. Others believed it was something far more terrifying, an embodiment of destruction itself, birthed from the chaos of the universe. It traveled alone, always appearing on planets where peace seemed the most fragile, turning hope into ruin. There were always survivors, though. The few who lived to tell the tale spoke of its appearance, an overwhelming force of nature that seemed both animal and something far beyond. Its eyes were the color of blood, glowing with an unearthly malice. Its roar was said to shake the heavens, an earth-shattering sound that could freeze the bravest of warriors in place. The beast's physical form was a nightmare, towering, with thick, scaled armor, claws that could tear through metal like paper, and a speed that defied logic. It was a predator that knew no equal. For the first few decades of its legend, no one dared to challenge it. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy had tried and failed to defeat the beast. Weapons were useless. Ships were useless. Strategies crumbled under the weight of its ferocity. The beast didn't fight like other creatures. It fought with a savage intelligence, an instinctual understanding of how to tear apart anything in its path. And it never stopped. Once a planet caught its attention, it would relentlessly hunt until everything was destroyed. The galaxy's ruling factions knew the beast existed, but they had no idea how to stop it. Talks of an alliance to face the creature had faded into nothingness, replaced by whispers of helplessness. The fear that rippled through the galaxy wasn't just about the beast's power. It was about its relentless, inevitable approach. When it came, there was no stopping it. The beast was simply too much. And then, as all seemed lost, there came a new report, a transmission from a human captain, a man whose name hadn't yet carried the weight of legend. Elias Ward, Earth's greatest military leader, known for his audacity and unyielding courage, had boldly declared that he could defeat the beast. The galaxy didn't know whether to laugh or despair at the audacity of the statement. Humans, after all, were small, fragile beings in a galaxy of giants. They had never faced a threat like this before. But Ward wasn't like other humans. He was a tactician, a strategist, and most importantly, he believed in something no one else did. He believed that the beast wasn't invincible. He believed that with the right tactics, the right mindset, humanity could overcome anything. It's not about size or strength. Ward had said in his speech, it's about adaptability. The beast may be the most powerful creature to walk the stars, but we have something it doesn't. The ability to think, to surprise, to change the game. The galaxy didn't know what to make of Ward's words. The fear was still there, lingering in the back of everyone's mind. But for the first time in centuries, the galaxy began to wonder, could a human really do the impossible? Could Earth's greatest warrior take on the beast and live to tell the tale? The universe wasn't sure, but it was about to find out. The beast might have been an unstoppable force, but humans had a way of proving that anything was possible when they put their minds to it. The decision was made swiftly. The galaxy's leaders, once skeptical, now found themselves desperately clinging to Ward's words. The idea that humanity might stand a chance against the beast, no matter how absurd it seemed, became the only flicker of hope. Earth's top military minds, led by Captain Elias Ward, were tasked with preparing for the impossible. Within weeks, a small but highly specialized fleet was assembled, an eclectic team of soldiers, scientists, and strategists, ready to go where no one else dared. They would be the first to face the beast in its lair, and if they could survive, they might uncover a way to destroy it. The mission was set in motion. The fleet would make its way to the beast's homeworld, a barren, lifeless planet known as Shorath. Its surface was jagged, cracked by the violence of untold battles. For centuries, no one had dared land on it. The beast made sure of that. But now the humans were about to break that long-standing taboo. They knew the risks. They had been briefed on the beast's legendary power, its unmatched savagery. But they went anyway, driven by the belief that their survival could mean the galaxy's survival. The universe would watch, holding its breath. As the fleet descended onto Shorath, the atmosphere felt thick with dread. The ground below was scorched, blackened by countless fires from past battles, and the skies above were choked with dust. For miles, there was nothing but desolation. It was the perfect setting for a creature that thrived on chaos and destruction. No one had expected to find much beyond the wreckage of civilizations. But what they didn't know was that the beast had been watching them from the moment they entered its domain. The expedition team set foot on the planet's surface, cautiously moving forward. Their mission was to gather intel, to observe the beast's movements, and, if possible, learn how it operated. But they were far too arrogant, far too confident in their preparations. They thought they had the advantage: high-tech equipment, weapons designed to combat the deadliest creatures in the galaxy, and the collective wisdom of some of the greatest minds in the universe. They were wrong. The first attack came without warning. A deafening roar echoed across the landscape, shaking the ground beneath their feet. The beast was there. It wasn't hidden, waiting in the shadows. It was standing right before them, an overwhelming force of destruction. In that instant, everything the humans thought they knew about war, about survival, was shattered. The beast didn't need weapons. Its sheer presence was enough to overwhelm them. It tore through the fleet with a speed and ferocity that was impossible to comprehend. Within minutes, the most advanced ships in the galaxy were reduced to burning wrecks. Ground troops, highly trained and well-armed, were caught off guard. The beast's claws shredded their defenses like paper. It didn't just kill, it hunted with a cruel precision, savoring every moment. And as the humans fought back, it only grew more enraged. They couldn't comprehend its strategy. It wasn't just about brute strength. It was a force of nature that understood battle on a level no one could grasp. It was untouchable. A desperate message reached the command center just moments before the transmission cut off completely. "It's too powerful. We can't." The rest was lost in a cacophony of static and screams. The galaxy's first attempt to study the beast ended in utter catastrophe. No one had survived. The few who had tried to escape in escape pods were hunted down by the beast, their ships obliterated mid-flight. When the transmission was recovered, the horror of the massacre was made clear. The expedition team had been wiped out in less than 6 hours. The beast had shown them no mercy. For all their technology, their planning, and their bravado, the humans had learned a brutal truth. The beast was unlike anything they had ever encountered. There was no winning here, no escaping it. The universe watched in stunned silence. The beast had once again proved that it was unstoppable. The arrogance of those who thought they could stand against it had been shattered. Humanity, for all its courage, had been humbled, reduced to nothing more than another casualty in the beast's endless reign of terror. But far from giving up, the leaders of the galaxy now turned their attention to a new question. Was humanity's fight really over, or had the beast just made a grave mistake? And where was Captain Elias Ward in all of this? If anyone could find a way to win, it would be him. The question now was whether he would dare to try again, knowing the cost of failure was death for all. In the wake of the disaster, the galaxy's leaders convened in a tense emergency session. The loss of the first expedition was a blow to the universe's collective morale, but it was more than just the loss of life. It was the loss of hope. Every race, from the mighty Drakor to the enigmatic Synthar, had recognized the terror that the beast unleashed. No one knew what to do, or even where to begin. The beast had crushed the most formidable forces the galaxy could muster without even breaking a sweat. The message was clear: no one was safe. But amidst the despair, A single voice cut through the silence, a voice familiar to the galaxy, one that had earned respect and admiration in countless battles. Captain Elias Ward stood before the council, unwavering, as if he had not just witnessed the massacre of his fellow humans, but had instead come back stronger. "We've seen what the beast can do," Ward began, his voice steady but carrying the weight of authority. "But we've also learned something important. The beast may be unstoppable, but it's not invincible." His words hung in the air, charged with an almost tangible defiance. For a moment, the room fell silent. The idea that humanity might still stand a chance seemed impossible. Every species present had witnessed the destruction the beast had wrought and assumed it could not be stopped. Yet Ward was suggesting that there was a way, a strategy, a glimmer of hope that no one had thought of. But how? Ward's eyes scanned the room, seeing the doubt etched on the faces of the galaxy's most seasoned commanders. "You want to send another fleet, another wave of soldiers?" he asked, his voice cutting through the doubt like a knife. "It'll be slaughtered just like the first. We've already seen that power. We've seen its speed. But we've also seen one thing it doesn't have, an understanding of what it's up against." He leaned forward, meeting the gaze of every leader in the room. "The beast is a force of nature, yes, but it's also predictable. It follows patterns, primal instincts. And those instincts, they can be outwitted. We don't need to match it in strength. We need to fight smarter." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. They had witnessed Ward's successes in the past. His daring strategies and quick thinking had turned the tide in battles that seemed impossible to win. Yet this was different. This wasn't just another war. It was an existential fight for survival against an entity that had wiped out entire civilizations. "What are you proposing, Captain Ward?" asked Commander Thalia, a respected strategist from the Drakor Empire. Her voice was sharp, but beneath her skepticism, there was a flicker of curiosity. Ward took a deep breath before speaking. "I'm proposing that we do something no one has dared do before. I'm going to face the beast, not with overwhelming force, but with something it can't comprehend: human unpredictability. We have something no other species does. We can think outside the box. We adapt. We improvise. And that's how we're going to defeat it." The room was still. There was no immediate outcry, but there was no immediate approval either. Ward's proposal was radical, bordering on suicidal. But his reputation, his track record, his sheer audacity, these were things the galaxy could not easily dismiss. "You're suggesting we send a human force with minimal backup into the beast's domain with nothing but strategy and improvisation to rely on?" Commander Zoreth of the Synthar asked, his voice laced with disbelief. Ward nodded, his eyes burning with determination. "Exactly. We won't try to defeat the beast in its element, in a straight-up fight. We'll find its weaknesses, its patterns. We'll outthink it. It might be a creature of destruction, but it's still a creature. And that means it can be outsmarted." The room was heavy with silence, but the weight of Ward's words lingered. After a long pause, Counselor Linara of the Mekari, an ancient race known for their wisdom, spoke. "You are asking us to gamble everything on a single human strategy, on the assumption that what the beast lacks in intelligence, we can exploit." Ward stood tall. "Yes, and I'm asking you to trust me." The council hesitated, but then, one by one, the heads of the galaxy's factions nodded, agreeing to give Ward one chance. They knew there was no other option. The beast would not stop. It would not relent. If humanity didn't step up, the entire galaxy would fall. Ward's voice softened, but it carried the weight of an unspoken promise. "I won't let you down. This time, we won't be the ones who fail." The galaxy watched as the fate of countless civilizations rested in the hands of one human, one man who believed that there was still hope. The universe had underestimated humanity before. Now, it was about to find out if Captain Elias Ward was right. Captain Elias Ward's plan had been approved, and the human force, now a small but determined task force, was prepared to venture into the beast's domain once more. This time, however, they weren't equipped with the usual armaments and heavy artillery designed to fight monsters and conquer worlds. No, this time they were equipped with something far more dangerous: human ingenuity. Ward had assembled a team of specialists, a handful of soldiers, engineers, and tech experts, and together they were going to take a different approach. They didn't come for a battle. They came for answers. The goal wasn't to destroy the beast with sheer firepower. It was to understand it, to study its patterns and behaviors, and exploit its weaknesses. In Ward's mind, this was the only way they could possibly have a chance. As the task force landed on Shoreth, the silence was deafening. The landscape stretched out before them, a barren wasteland filled with jagged cliffs, scorched earth, and swirling dust storms. The planet was not a place for life, but for death, a fitting home for a creature like the beast. Ward and his team set up their base of operations in a secluded canyon, far from any obvious points of interest, hoping that the beast wouldn't detect their presence immediately. "We need to move quickly," Ward said, his voice calm but firm. "We don't know how long it will take for the beast to catch our scent." The team began their work, setting up sensors, deploying drones, and using every tool at their disposal to observe the environment. They didn't expect the beast to walk into their camp immediately. They needed to learn, to understand its habits and behaviors. If they could figure out where it was likely to strike, they could plan their next move. Hours passed with little more than tension and the weight of expectation hanging over them. But then, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, the first sign of the beast's presence came. A distant roar, shaking the air like a thunderclap, reverberated across the land. It was low, guttural, and primal, a sound that no creature could replicate. Ward's eyes narrowed. They had only just begun their mission, and the beast was already aware of them. "It's coming," he said, his voice grim but composed. "Prepare yourselves." As the team scrambled to ready their weapons, Ward kept his focus on the larger picture. The beast wasn't just a mindless killing machine. It was intelligent, adaptive, and strategic in its own way. They had to be the same. They couldn't just rely on firepower. They had to outsmart it. The ground trembled beneath them. The roar grew louder, closer, until the air itself seemed to vibrate with its force. And then, from the swirling dust and shadows, it emerged. The beast. It was far larger than any of them had expected. Its silhouette loomed against the crimson sky, a massive, towering form that seemed to absorb the light itself. Scaled armor covered its body, and its eyes glowed with an otherworldly ferocity. The sheer size of it was staggering, like a living mountain coming to life. Ward's heart raced, but his mind remained clear. The beast's presence was overwhelming, but he had no time for fear. He had a job to do. The team had set up traps and diversions in the surrounding area, knowing that a direct confrontation would be suicide. They would need to outmaneuver it, lead it into a position where they could study its movements and weaknesses. The beast let out another roar, this one deafening, as it charged toward their position. Ward's team reacted quickly, activating the first diversion, a series of loud noises designed to draw the beast's attention away from their camp. The plan worked. The beast skidded to a halt, its massive head swiveling toward the sound. It was momentarily distracted, but it didn't leave. Instead, it began circling, its eyes scanning the area with a calculating focus. Ward had expected this. The beast wasn't merely hunting them, it was trying to understand them, trying to find a weakness. And that was where they had the advantage. The beast relied on brute force and instinct. Humanity relied on intelligence and adaptability. If they could just outthink it for long enough, they might stand a chance. As the team deployed more sensors and drones, they observed the beast's behavior more closely. It was methodical, precise, and far more intelligent than they had initially believed. It understood the terrain, it adapted to the distractions, and it had a strange tendency to move in patterns that Ward quickly began to recognize. The beast was strong, yes, but it was not invincible. "We can do this," Ward muttered under his breath, watching the creature's every move. "We can outsmart it." For the first time since they had landed, Ward felt a flicker of hope. The beast was terrifying, but it was not the unstoppable force that everyone had believed. It had weaknesses, and they were going to find them. This first confrontation had only just begun, and already Ward knew that they were on the right track. The beast circled their position, its massive form casting an eerie shadow across the canyon as it moved with terrifying grace. Each step it took shook the ground beneath the human task force. The team was hidden behind a series of makeshift barriers, simple camouflage tents, and rocky outcrops they had set up in an effort to blend into the environment. But as Ward observed, the beast didn't need to rely on sight. It was something deeper, a primal sense of awareness, something that made it aware of every movement, every sound, every shift in the air. It could feel them, it could smell them, and it was methodically hunting them. "Stay low and stay silent," Ward commanded, his voice low but steady. "We don't want it to find us yet. Not until we're ready." The team had prepared for this moment. This was the part of the plan they had practiced 100 times in simulations. But this wasn't a simulation. This was real. The beast wasn't some theoretical opponent. It was a living, breathing nightmare, a creature that existed to hunt, to destroy. The sensors Ward had set up began to flash, and the drones in the sky sent back live footage of the beast's movements. It was moving slowly, deliberately, as if it was aware that it was being watched. Ward's eyes never left the screen, his fingers tapping on the console as he analyzed the data in real time. He needed to know its next move. Every second counted. "They're not hunting for food," Ward muttered more to himself than anyone else. "This is pure instinct. It's looking for us, testing us." The beast suddenly stopped in its tracks, its head tilting slightly as if it had picked up on something. A disturbance in the air, a shift in the ground beneath it. Ward's heart skipped a beat. It had sensed their presence, but the diversion hadn't worked. The beast was far too intelligent. It had adapted to the trick and was no longer fooled. "Prepare the next phase," Ward ordered. "Move out. Stay sharp." The team spread out, repositioning themselves to set up the next series of distractions. Ward had known from the beginning that a direct confrontation would be disastrous. They were too small, too fragile, but with careful planning and patience, they could force the beast into a trap, a situation where they could learn more about its behavior and just maybe find a way to strike. They activated the next diversion, loud, mechanical noises followed by the sudden release of a flashbang grenade designed to create disorientation. The beast's head snapped toward the sound, its glowing eyes narrowing with a hint of confusion. It didn't charge immediately, but it was now aware of something moving in the distance. Ward's tactical mind was firing on all cylinders now. He had seen enough patterns to begin formulating a strategy. The beast, for all its power, wasn't omnipotent. It reacted instinctively, always following the path laid out before it by its own desires and its hunt. If they could predict its next move, if they could lead it into a situation where it was forced to confront its own instincts in a confined space, they might just have a shot at surviving. The beast let out another bone-rattling roar, one filled with fury and frustration. It was no longer just hunting, it was enraged. And when it was enraged, it would be unpredictable, more dangerous, but also more prone to mistakes. The team needed to capitalize on that. Ward tapped into the team's communication network, his voice cool despite the rising tension. "It's coming. This next part is crucial. We need to funnel it toward the West Canyon. There's a choke point there. Once we've got it, we'll move on to Phase 2. As the team began to move into position, Ward couldn't help but feel a surge of adrenaline. This was the first real test of his strategy. This was where the plan would either fall apart or come to life. The beast was relentless, but it was also predictable in its own way. If they could outsmart it long enough, they might just survive long enough to learn what it took to bring it down. With the beast following the path Ward had carefully designed, the team pressed on, knowing that they were walking a fine line between survival and annihilation. Every movement, every step they took, needed to be precise. There was no room for error. Suddenly, the ground shook again as the beast charged, its massive form crashing through the dust and debris like a freight train. Ward's breath caught in his throat, but he remained calm, his mind laser-focused on the task at hand. "Now," he shouted. The team sprung into action, positioning themselves at the choke point just as the beast barreled toward them. It was furious, its eyes burning with an unrelenting rage. But now it was trapped. It had no choice but to follow the path they had set. And as the beast came closer, Ward knew that the moment of truth was upon them. They had no more time to wait. Now was the time to make their move. The beast's thunderous roar echoed through the canyon as it charged toward the narrow choke point Ward's team had so carefully prepared. The ground quaked beneath its massive feet, and the air was thick with dust as the creature's claws scraped against the jagged rocks. It was nearly upon them, its glowing eyes fixed on the humans, filled with fury and bloodlust. It had fallen into the trap, just as Ward had planned. "Hold your positions," Ward shouted into the comms, his voice sharp and authoritative. "Do not engage until I say so." The team of soldiers, their hearts racing, crouched behind the rocks, weapons at the ready, waiting for Ward's signal. Every movement had to be precise. One mistake could lead to disaster. The beast was too powerful to fight head-on, and if they failed to outsmart it now, it would be their last mistake. Ward's eyes locked on the approaching beast. It was charging, its massive form closing in, but it wasn't quite in the perfect position yet. Ward's mind raced through every possible scenario, his fingers twitching as he waited for the exact moment to strike. He knew that they were close to being overwhelmed, but this was the point where his strategy would either succeed or crumble. The beast had walked right into their hands, but now they had to make sure they controlled the situation. "Get ready," Ward muttered to himself, his pulse steady but quickening with anticipation. The seconds felt like hours as the beast drew nearer, its massive jaws bared, saliva dripping from its sharp teeth. It was ready to tear through anything in its path, and the team would be the next casualties unless Ward could execute the next phase flawlessly. As the beast came within striking distance, Ward's eyes narrowed. "Now," he barked, his voice like a crack of thunder. At that moment, the team initiated the final part of the plan. The ground beneath the beast's feet suddenly shifted as a series of explosives, carefully placed earlier, detonated in a controlled chain reaction. The explosion shook the canyon, sending clouds of dust and rock flying into the air. The shockwave hit the beast directly, causing it to stagger and momentarily lose its balance. For a brief instant, the beast was disoriented. It howled in rage, thrashing against the rocky terrain, but it was no longer charging blindly forward. The moment of confusion was all the humans needed. Ward had anticipated this. He knew the beast's instincts would take over in a frenzy, but it would also create an opening. "Move in," Ward ordered. Soldiers sprang from their positions, racing toward the beast's now crippled form. They used the canyon's narrowness to their advantage, moving in tight formations, never giving the beast a clear line of sight. Every soldier knew that they were taking a risk, but it was a calculated one. The beast was disoriented, vulnerable for a few seconds, and this was their only chance to gather more data and gain an edge. Ward, moving with precision, positioned himself near the front, his weapon raised but not aimed to kill. He wasn't looking to destroy the beast, not yet. This was about understanding it, testing its reaction to human tactics, and perhaps gathering enough information to make a more effective strike when the time was right. The beast, still struggling to regain its footing, let out another primal roar, this one mixed with frustration. It was wild now, thrashing in every direction, but its attacks were desperate, lacking the calculated force it had earlier. The soldiers closed in, setting up additional traps and monitoring the beast's every movement. They had one shot at this. If they failed now, the beast would recover, and they would be right back where they started, trapped, outmatched, and at the mercy of its fury. Ward's eyes flicked to the sensor readouts, his fingers tapping commands into the console at his side. The data was pouring in fast, too fast for the beast to comprehend. It was reacting to stimuli it hadn't been prepared for, and every moment of disorientation was giving Ward and his team the upper hand. "Keep it moving," Ward yelled. "Don't let it find its footing again." The soldiers worked in unison, forcing the beast to move further into the canyon. Every step it took was a battle, but with every misstep, every stumble, Ward could see the plan coming together. They were wearing the beast down, driving it into a corner where it would be unable to retaliate with its usual overwhelming force. But Ward knew better than to get complacent. The beast was still dangerous, still very much a force to be reckoned with. Even in its disoriented state, it could turn the tables in an instant if they weren't careful. The key was to keep it off balance, keep it in a position where it couldn't fully recover. Ward's mind never stopped working, constantly calculating and recalculating. There was no room for error, but for the first time since the mission had begun, he allowed himself a small measure of hope. The plan was working. The beast was finally beginning to show signs of vulnerability. This wasn't the end, not yet, but they were closer than they'd ever been. The beast's furious thrashing had subsided, but the creature was far from defeated. It was still a massive, deadly force, and despite its disorientation, it had begun to adapt to the traps the human team had set. The canyon had become a deadly labyrinth, a place where every twist and turn could lead to death. Ward's team was running out of time. They needed to make their next move, or they would lose the beast to the wilderness, and with it, their one chance to study it further. Ward's mind raced as he surveyed the scene. The beast was no longer in the wild frenzy it had been earlier. It was thinking, calculating, testing the traps. And that meant it was getting smarter. It had learned from its previous mistakes, and now it was searching for its next opportunity to strike. If they didn't act fast, the advantage would be lost. Keep moving. Don't stop until I say. Ward shouted into his team's comms, his voice tense but steady. The soldiers continued to push the beast deeper into the canyon, using the narrow space to corral it, forcing it toward the next phase of the trap. They had expected the creature to adapt, but the speed at which it had done so had surprised even Ward. This wasn't just brute force. The beast had intelligence, and it was using that intelligence to turn the tables. Ward knew that their current strategy couldn't last much longer. The beast had become too aware of its surroundings, too focused on breaking through their line. The human task force had pushed it far enough into the canyon, but now they were starting to run out of options. They had one final dangerous move to make, a high-risk gamble that could either trap the beast for good or cost them everything. Ward turned to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Mara Stone, who was scanning the battlefield through a pair of advanced optics. "We're close," Ward said, his voice tight with determination. "But we can't keep it contained for much longer. We need to give it a reason to chase us, pull it into the final phase of the trap. Once it's there, we'll set the final trigger." Mara's eyes flicked to Ward, and she nodded, understanding the plan. It was bold, dangerous even, but it was the only chance they had. They had to make the beast believe it could catch them, lead it to the last and most critical part of the canyon, a narrow ravine where they could use the environment to trap it. Ward knew what it would take. They would have to draw the beast's full attention to them, giving it the impression that they were retreating, just enough to make it follow them willingly into the most confined space they could manage. There, they would deploy a series of mines that, when triggered, would collapse the canyon walls on top of the beast. It was a risky maneuver, and it left little room for error. If the beast saw through the ruse, or if one of the soldiers made a wrong move, everything would go wrong. The creature would tear through the humans in seconds. But if they succeeded, the beast would be trapped, finally contained, perhaps for the first time since it had first emerged from the depths of its world. "Are we ready?" Ward asked, looking over his shoulder at Mara. Mara took a deep breath, checking the devices strapped to her waist and the remote control linked to the mines. "We're ready, but this has to be perfect. No mistakes." Ward nodded, his mind clearing of all distractions. "Then let's do it." The human team began to move again, but this time they weren't retreating entirely. They were luring the beast. Ward kept his focus on the creature, watching as it turned its massive head toward them, recognizing the sudden change in their behavior. The beast's rage flared again, and it charged forward, its roar deafening. The soldiers had hoped for this, had planned for it. The canyon walls were beginning to narrow, and Ward knew they were closing in on the ravine. As they ran, the tension grew unbearable. Every step, every heartbeat was filled with the knowledge that failure would mean certain death. Now, Ward ordered, and with that, the team spread out in a coordinated maneuver, activating the mines hidden along the canyon floor. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the devices hummed to life, sending out pulses of energy that disrupted the beast's senses, causing it to stumble momentarily. But it didn't stop. It was too focused, too driven by its instinct to hunt. Ward's pulse quickened as he saw the beast closing in. The next few seconds would decide everything. The ravine was only a few meters away. The beast was just behind them, and the trap was nearly sprung. If they could just get the beast to the narrowest part of the ravine. The beast roared again, its massive jaws snapping as it lunged for the humans. But this time, it was too late. Ward hit the final switch, and the trap was sprung. The canyon walls began to shift, the sound of grinding rock filling the air as the walls of the ravine began to collapse inward. The beast's roar turned into a howl of rage as it tried to break free, but it was trapped. The canyon walls closed in around it, forcing it into the smallest space it had ever been confined to. Ward felt a rush of triumph surge through him, but there was no time to savor the victory. The beast was still alive, still struggling. They had only just begun the long, dangerous process of subduing it. But for this moment, they had succeeded. The trap had worked. The dust began to settle as the echo of the collapsing canyon walls faded into a tense silence. Ward stood at the edge of the ravine, his eyes locked onto the trapped beast, still thrashing furiously, but unable to escape the confines of the narrow space it had been forced into. Its massive form was wedged between the jagged walls, and its powerful limbs struggled futilely to free itself. Every growl and roar sent tremors through the ground, but the beast had nowhere to go. For the first time, it was contained. Ward let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding, but the victory was bittersweet. The trap had worked, but the beast was still alive, still dangerous. It was only a matter of time before it adapted again and found a way to escape if they didn't act quickly. They couldn't afford to waste time celebrating. The true challenge had only just begun. Is everyone accounted for? Ward asked, his voice calm but edged with urgency. He turned to Mara, who was standing beside him, her expression tense as she watched the beast. Mara nodded, eyes flicking over to the team, who were now regrouping. All present, Captain, but we need to act fast. It's only a matter of time before it breaks through. Ward turned his gaze back to the beast, the massive creature's eyes burning with hatred and intelligence. He could almost feel its thoughts, the way it was studying its surroundings, trying to find an escape. It was a creature of instinct, but there was no denying that it was also calculating, learning, evolving. It wouldn't be contained for long unless they took drastic measures. We'll need to reinforce the walls, Ward said, already planning their next steps. Set up the perimeter and prepare the containment protocols. We're not just going to hold it here. We're going to ensure it stays here. Understood, Mara replied, signaling to the team to begin setting up defensive barriers and laying down additional traps. The soldiers worked quickly, their movements coordinated and precise. They knew that if they failed now, the beast would break free, and they would be trapped with it. Ward turned his attention back to the beast, his mind racing. They had learned so much already, but they needed more. The creature's intelligence was unlike anything they had encountered before. This wasn't a mindless monster. It was a force of nature that had survived for who knew how long. They had to know its weaknesses, its vulnerabilities, if they were going to stand any chance of neutralizing it completely. Activate the surveillance drones, Ward ordered. Get a closer look at its movements. I want to see how it reacts to our containment measures. As the drones hummed to life and began transmitting real-time data, Ward watched intently. The beast's behavior was erratic but intelligent. It had stopped struggling as much, its eyes now scanning the perimeter as if it were searching for something. Anything. Weak enough to exploit. It wasn't just physically powerful, it was relentless in its pursuit of survival, and it seemed to know that it had to adapt to its new environment. Ward's mind raced with possibilities. The beast wasn't just a threat, it was a puzzle, and as every new piece of data came in, Ward began to see the shape of a solution taking form. He realized the beast wasn't just responding to physical stimuli, it was reacting to the patterns around it, the way the human team was moving and setting up their defenses. It wasn't chaos, it was precision. Keep an eye on its patterns, Ward said to Mara. It's studying us. It's learning how we operate. We need to make sure it never figures us out. Mara nodded, her face grim. We'll keep the perimeter tight. But Captain, what happens if it gets out? What if it breaks through? Ward didn't answer immediately. He knew that there was a chance, perhaps a small one, that the beast would escape, even with their best efforts. But he also knew this. If it did, they would have one final option left. One weapon they had been hesitant to deploy, the most dangerous of all. I'll handle it, Ward said quietly. Just make sure it doesn't get to us. We hold this position until I give the word. The team continued to reinforce their defenses, but Ward's thoughts were elsewhere. His plan had worked thus far, but he knew that no plan survived first contact without adjustments. The beast was growing more intelligent by the minute, and that meant they needed to adapt too. As the minutes stretched into hours, the tension never lifted. The beast continued to watch them, its gaze intense and calculating. Ward had no illusions. This was a battle of wits as much as it was of strength. And if they didn't outsmart it now, the beast would eventually learn enough to break free. Ward watched the creature closely, every movement, every shift of its massive body. He could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on you. They had come so far, but the final stage of this fight had only just begun. The beast was contained, yes, but the real challenge was making sure it stayed that way. And Ward would do whatever it took to ensure that humanity, not the beast, would be the one to survive.